Hello and welcome to this game analysis session at Chess University. My name is Kairav Joshi, and today I will analyze a game played by a student named Asher and teach important concepts along the way. So let's begin. In this game, our student was Black, and so we'll take a look at the game from Black's perspective. And the game began with e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and pawn to d3. Well, white has misplayed the opening already. D3 is not really the most accurate move in this position. There are better alternatives such as bishop to c4, bishop to b5, even pawn to d4. Pawn d3 is a bit passive, blocks in the bishop, and so black's already at least equal. Black played the move bishop c5, developing a new piece, so that's good. And white played a3. I'm not sure if a3 is a terrible move. It's not the best move because white had better options. White could have developed a piece. White could have even been a little tricky. Take the pawn on e5, and this might even give white some advantage. For example, if we take back with the knight, then d4, and white has good center control, and white would win back a piece. Perhaps black has some tricks too, such as playing bishop takes f2 here. But in any case, white had better moves besides a3, and for that reason, maybe even for black, a better move here would have been knight to f6. I don't think bishop c5 is that bad either, but knight takes e5 does seem to give some advantage to white. Okay, so the move a3 was played, and after that black played the move knight f3, knight to f6, pawn h3, and castles. Castling is okay for black. One suggestion would be d5 instead, because white's playing passively. As you can see, a3, h3, these are moves that don't accomplish too much for white. They lose time, and black has an opportunity to get ahead in development, bring more pieces out, and take more control of the center. And so I would recommend d5, but castling is also good, and white plays knight to c3, black plays a6. Again, a6 is not a bad move. I think it's okay. I mean, you're taking away the b5 square from the knight. You might want to play b5 yourself in the future, and so your pawn would cover it. But with that said, I'm not sure if that's the first move that would come to mind. Maybe a move like d6 would be a little bit better perhaps, but a6 is also okay. White played bishop to g5, and now the game starts to get a little bit interesting. After h6, bishop h4, black played the move bishop e7, and I can see why. And perhaps if you don't see why on your end, maybe it's a good time to pause the video for a moment. So why did black play bishop e7? So the reason is that the knight is pinned, and that's never a good thing from our end, right? It's annoying that the knight is pinned. But furthermore, I think white has knight d5 as an option, pressurizing the pinned piece. And so there is some pressure coming on this knight, and I think black plays bishop e7 just to eliminate that pressure, and now the knight's not pinned anymore. However, this is not the best way to play. I think white's doing fine in this position. Black had to play a defensive move, backwards development, and white could play bishop e2, and that's what actually happened in the game. I think a better move in this position would have been d6, even though it looks wrong. it looks wrong because this allows knight d5, pressurizing the pinned piece, and we have blocked our bishop out of this e7 resource here. However, the point is after knight d5, you could simply play g5 and force the bishop out. So after g5, white has two options. If he just moves the bishop back, well, then you take the knight, and you now have a much better pawn structure, and black is doing very well. So most likely black would play knight takes f6, check, queen takes, and bishop goes back. But again, in this position, we enjoy a nice space advantage. White's pieces are pretty passive, and I think you have many ideas as black that would be reasonable. Simple development like bishop e6 should be fine. If you want to be more aggressive, you could perhaps move the queen back and then play a move like f5 in the near future. So you have a couple of ideas, but in general, we have more space and more active pieces, so black is perfectly fine here. Okay, but instead black played bishop e7, bishop e2, d6, castles, bishop e6. These are fine developing moves, bringing more pieces out. And white played the move d4. After d4, black plays e takes d, knight takes d, and bishop to d7. However, bishop d7 is a inaccurate move. There's actually quite a complicated line here, which gives black a solid advantage. I think most players would miss it, so I don't blame black for not seeing it. But if you're up to the challenge, go ahead, pause the video, and think for a couple of minutes here. 3-4 minutes at least. Black to move. Do you see a very strong move for black? Alright, assuming you paused and had a think, the best move for black here is knight takes d4. Extremely strong. Let's see why. After knight takes d4, the only move white has is queen takes d4. But the real brilliancy happens here with the move knight takes e4. We are now taking the pawn and giving him the opportunity to take our knight. Now, it must be noted that if he takes the knight, we simply take the bishop because we now have a discovered attack from our bishop to this bishop. So that means we win a free pawn if he simply takes our knight. So the only move to analyze would be bishop takes e7, where he takes our bishop, and now our queen is attacked. And so if we take back the bishop with our queen, then we would be down a full piece because white would take the knight. But that's where it gets interesting, because here you don't take the bishop, you actually take this knight on c3. You have to analyze your forcing moves, right? Checks, captures, and threats. In this case, we have a very nice capture on c3, ignoring the threat on our queen. Because if he takes, we can now take his bishop with check, and we have a nice fork tactic, picking up the queen afterwards. And so king moves away, we grab the queen, and let's say he grabs the pawn. The end result is that we're up a full piece, right? Both sides have 5 pawns, but we have an extra knight for free. So very interesting tactic. If it's a blitz game, that's pretty much impossible to analyze, but in a slow chess game, I think it's doable if you analyze your forcing moves. Okay, so black did not see that, and instead black played the move bishop d7 here instead of taking the knight. After bishop d7, knight f5 was played, and black played rook e8. This move is a mistake because you allow white to trade off this knight for the dark squared bishop, and that allows him to put more pressure on your dark square. So for example, um, he could just take, and then after queen takes, maybe he could play f4, and then threaten to play a move like e5 in the near future. And so you have some problems to deal with now, and you were better off having the bishop. But now that you've lost that bishop, I think white has some dark square opportunities. The correct move here would be just to take the knight instead of moving the rook. Just take it. You take the knight. He has doubled pawns, and yeah, I mean the position is pretty equal. I think. I am very happy with black. I would play queen d7, attack this pawn. There's no pin. Bring out the rooks on the e file. It's a nice position. Okay, but after rook e1, knight e5 was played. Also, I think it's inaccurate. Black still should have taken this knight. f4 is played. Knight to g6. Bishop g3 and bishop f8. In this position, I would still play bishop takes f5, and that's been true for the past couple moves. Life is much easier when you just trade off this d7 bishop for this knight, and in the resulting position, white has these doubled pawns which are not really helping him, and there's no dynamic threat that black has to worry about. So that would have been optimal, but okay, bishop f8, bishop f3, and finally black takes, and that's good. The move is still good here. E takes f5, knight e7, aiming at this pawn. Bishop to h4, knight takes f5. This all looks pretty fine. Rook trade happens, and bishop takes f6. So not ideal. Your pawn structure is now weakened, but black is not that bad here. I think white has some advantage because of the pawn structure, but besides that, it's an acceptable position, I would say. Though what happens next is kind of shocking. White played the move b4, after which black played c6. c6 is a mistake, and this is a position where I would like you to pause again, have a think. Why is b4 a bad move for white, and what would you do about it as black? Go ahead and pause the video, have a think. Alright, so here's how you get to the solution. In any position, you need to analyze the forcing moves first, starting with the most forcing. Checks, then captures, and then threats. So if I just do the simple analysis and just do a one move calculation or a two move calculation for the checks, captures, and threats I have available, starting with checks because they're the most forcing, then the very first move that I would analyze is queen to e3, because that's the only real check I can give. Of course, queen to e1 is also a check, but then my queen dies, and so that's not good. However, queen to e3 is a fine queen move, giving a check. Now, what else does the queen do on e3? Well, the queen also attacks this knight, doesn't it? And so actually white blundered a piece by playing b4. b4, the drawback of a pawn move is that you leave squares behind. This pawn used to protect c3. It does not anymore. And so actually the best move is queen to e3 check, and that's just a free piece for black. So black would be winning on the spot. So this was missed. Black instead played c6. That's a bad move because, well, you missed the free piece. But besides that, the thought process was wrong, right? It's not that much useful if I just tell you that this move is bad and this move is good. It's better if I can teach you why and teach you the method for playing better. Here, black is worried about the b7 pawn hanging. So the idea of c6 was, okay, you just protect your pawn, you improve your pawn presence in the center, maybe you push the other pawn next. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, those moves do improve your position. But before you do any of that, before you make a simple position improving move, check your forcing moves because they might be much better. Okay. All right. So bishop g4 was played. Black played knight e3, which is a fine move, attacking the queen and the bishop. However, the best move still is queen to e3, which wins a free knight. But okay, knight e3 was played. Queen d2 takes d5. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Queen d7. All in all, I think black's doing okay. Black has more material, right? If we count up the pawns, we have 4 and 7 pawns. White has 6, and so black is a bit better. However, the position's a little bit misplayed here. I think that, so after king f2 from white, I think the way I would have played, that would be the easiest, would be to just take the rook, simplify because we're ahead some material. And after a move like, if king takes, we can give check on e7, so maybe queen e1 is better. And then you have options. I mean, you could play, I think queen d6 is probably the easiest. Play queen d6, get the queen in. And then, yeah, I mean, you're just better as black. You have pawns on both sides. Your bishop should be useful. You have the extra pawn, and so, and the more active queen, potentially. A queen trade is also good for you if you do a queen trade because, again, you're up the pawn and the resulting endgame should be winning. But that's not what happened. So instead of rook takes e1, instead of rook takes e1, king h7 was played. This gives white some opportunity to get his pieces in and make them a bit more active. I don't think that rook h1 was correct, but maybe he could have done knight to e4, which is tricky. We cannot take because the queen falls. So there's some tricks here for white, but okay. Yeah, so I think black's play was not optimal. And so after rook h1, rook e5, knight e2, rook e4. I mean, all in all, I think black's still doing okay. Black's still up the pawn, but black makes a mistake here and plays queen e5. I assume time pressure was in play, but now that the rook is gone, I think black is no longer better. Now white should have the upper hand, or be close to equal because the bishop is still strong. So maybe there's some yeah, I mean, there should be drawing chances for sure. Bishop f4 was played. Queen to d3. A queen trade would not be good for black, and so black correctly played queen to e5. Rook. Black played bishop to g3, which is a blunder because white can just take. But white didn't see that, and white played the move king to f3, and surprisingly, black has a forced win now. Can you see it? So the correct move is queen to f4 check, queen to f2 check, and queen takes e1 mate. And that's how the game ended. So yeah, all in all, it was a good game for black. The opening was played fairly well. There were some missed opportunities to have a better position. In the middle game, I think that black became a bit too passive. Black could have been more active and would have enjoyed a better position. And then at one point, black was just winning. Black had the opportunity to win a free piece if black analyzed forcing moves first. Even besides that, black was up material with the extra pawn and should have been able to simplify and win the end game. But I think at the end, time pressure played a role. So that wraps up this analysis. I hope, Asher, you found this useful for Black and it helps you further improve. And for everyone else watching, I hope you enjoyed this analysis and learned a couple things. Thank you for watching, and I will